welcome to the Voice with Michael Kirkpatrick and Monique Wyatt. And today we're going to discuss Africa as usual. So we discuss every week. We take a topic and we discuss between Michael and myself. But we would also like people to call in if they have any questions or they have any comment or they have any recommendations for Michael and myself. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Monique. It's good to be here again. Just for our listeners' sake, we're hosting from all over the world here. Monique is calling in from rainy London, and I'm calling in from, it's hot Dallas. It's hot here in Dallas, Texas, and we are broadcasting.
Michael, we were actually promised a very, very the hottest weekend of the year, because we have a bank holiday here and we have also a big festival, which is the Notting Hill Festival. So, but it's been raining from yesterday, so hopefully it's going to be better.
There have been a lot of issues in the news regarding Africa this week.
What are we going to be talking about today? We're going to be talking about education.
I do want a proper recognition to Stephen Kiprotich from Uganda, who at the World Championships in last week. He won the men's marathon, and that's really great news because Stephen Kiprotich also won the Olympic marathon in
London,
last summer. And this guy, he is now a world champion marathon runner, not from Kenya, not from Ethiopia, not from the traditional, marathon countries.
Yeah.
But he's being from Uganda, where there are no training facilities. There is no support, state-sponsored support of athletics. And this guy can outrun anyone in the world. That's just an amazing story. And so
we're very proud of him.
Yeah, and to see the pride, you see it in other athletics. You see it in sports like soccer, football, as most of the world calls it. You have to excuse me for using American lingo. But, when it comes to soccer games, especially on the national level, it brings out an incredible amount of national pride. When your team wins or wins a tournament, we don't really have that here in the U.S. But also in sports like the Olympics and with Kiprotich's victory in the World Championships, you see an outpouring of national pride. And
Michael, you're right. Because if they're so proud, they should now be investing at really primary level to get our kids. Because that was the first Olympic gold that we won in 40 years, more than 40 years.
Yeah. And that it serves as an inspiration to the youth. It's an inspiration to the youth, and I hope part of what Stephen Kiprotich is afforded the ability to do is to speak to young people, to speak to the youth, not just in Uganda, but all over Africa. Where there's a will, there's a way, and you have to persevere. You can't quit. And of course, you need encouragement. You need support of your friends and family. Obviously, in Kiprotich's situation, he has the support of his countrymen. Maybe not the support of his government, but on social media, after the marathon last weekend, on social media, I was just watching on Twitter and on Facebook and other social media sites.
It was amazing. Yeah,
if you were Ugandan and you were anywhere in the world, if you were in America and Canada and in England, no matter where you were, all of a sudden it just reminded you again that you were Ugandan and you were incredibly proud of the success of somebody else who was from Uganda. So that was a great story, and I love hearing stories like that. The positive success stories that not just in athletics, but in other disciplines. And that's what I hope we're able to do with the show, is just bring to people's attention positive things that are going on.
Yeah, there are a lot of positive stuff that is going on in Africa that is usually not highlighted. But also, Michael, what we have to point out, because of the ongoing conflict in the whole of Africa, you find that a lot of the children are not even finishing primary school. So in Gulu, where I am from originally, we have 90% of children not attending any schools at all. Not any school. So what we had was just 10%.
Yeah, the issue of education, really, of course, everybody, you see a lot of the charities, churches, NGOs, they'll highlight, through child sponsorship or asking for donations, that, hey, this will help educate a child. This will help put a child, through school. And as true as that may be, people need to understand the small print. They need to understand really what, nobody's going to object to educating a child. Absolutely not. Absolutely. All the cliches, the key to the future, the future of a nation, the hope and dreams of the youth, all of that, I get that. I'm absolutely an advocate for education, but we need to also bring to mind and start questioning things like quality of education. We need to start talking about things like the curriculum. What curriculum is being taught in the school? We need to talk about things like, the infrastructure of schools. Whether it's the buildings themselves, the supplies, the books. How old are the textbooks? What's the content of the textbooks? People aren't asking those questions, and
Michael, you see, we have a problem.
Yeah, we've seen some very well-intentioned people talk about education, but when it comes to the execution and the strategy of the education, it just falls apart. I mean, it's just terrible. And
because I personally, I do not agree with child sponsorship, because what child sponsorship does, it just concentrates that, okay, we pay the child school fees. It doesn't take into account at all. After the child goes home, this child is still going to bed without food. People talk about child poverty, but they are not actually realizing that there is no such thing called child poverty, because the child don't have any assets. The child don't have a job. The child don't have a house. How can the child be poor? The child is poor because of other factors, because the parents are poor. So a lot of these marketing that we talked about last week, which is called poverty porn, it doesn't target the parent. It kind of excludes the parent, because if you put the parent in the center that the child is poor because the parents are poor, nobody will want to sponsor this child.
Yeah, and that's the issue of poverty. Of course, people aren't going to say that, boy, I don't want to end poverty. I don't want to end communities that are struggling, or I don't want to end, the poverty and struggling communities. But the issue really is that, like you had said, child poverty doesn't exist. A child is the product of the parents, but the child lives in a community, and people need to understand, why is the community poor? Why are the parents poor? And we need to stop. We need to stop targeting the symptoms that lead to those things. Poverty, lack of school fees for a child to be educated is a symptom. It's not a cause.
No.
A child, not getting an education, not getting access to medical care, not being able to eat, a well-balanced meal. Those are all symptoms. People need to go back and say, what's causing it? What is causing it?
I agree.
Because if you are not, and again, we're not going to solve these things overnight. Believe me, as much as everybody thinks that they can, or they have the silver bullet, there's a lot of moving parts. We need to address the causes of poverty.
I agree.
things are much more difficult to discuss. They're much more difficult to understand, and they're much more difficult to go out and beg for donor money because people don't have the time nor the interest. They would just rather write a check and hand it over. So something like education, what happens is, now imagine this. Now we take it for granted, even though there's controversy in the United States about, the quality of education and the funding and tax revenues used to fund education. It leads to great discussions, but we do have, and comparative to other parts of the world, a stellar education system. And the same in the UK. I mean, compared to other parts of the world, stellar. Now, people kind of want to project that education system into other parts of the world, and we'll say, parts of Africa. Now, what happens? We'll bring this utopia to fruition. Okay, let's say every child is able to afford an education and goes through 12 years of uninterrupted education, because people have to.
Yeah, which is impossible in Africa because of the conflict.
Yeah, well, because of conflict and just circumstances, whether it's the weather, whether it's, somebody getting sick or a parent dying or a relative dying, and, you have to take other children or siblings, or, a storm blows the roof off of your house, or, a flood comes along and wipes away your property. There's all those dynamics. So let's say in a utopian world here, a child gets 12 years of uninterrupted, quality, updated curriculum education. Perfect world.
Yeah.
What happens when that child graduates and has a diploma in their hands and there's no jobs? You are fueling a revolution. That's exactly what's happening in Egypt. That's exactly what the Arab Spring was all about. You all of a sudden have a generation that was brought up where donors and charities and philanthropists and all these people were saying education is the way to go. Let's educate the population. Educate the population.
But Michael, what we should point out, most of the sponsorship stops at the age of 18. Because they assume this is no longer a child. This is an adult.
Yeah, and
this is no longer a child. So, but in most of these cases, the child is not even completed primary school, leave alone secondary school. So what it just built is the circle of poverty. So the child then goes and have a child themselves, who they cannot look after.
Yeah, and that's something that we both have seen repeatedly, and you can see it. I mean, it's not just a theory. I mean, you see it lived out, and I've seen it with organizations where, and the analogy I use is, it is like building the foundation of a house and then walking away from it.
Yeah.
And that's just foolish. That is foolish. Yeah. To project your culture of a child gets 12 years of uninterrupted education. Well, that's the way it should be everywhere in the world. That's pretty arrogant. That's pretty condescending. And to say that
go on.
And to say that, if you're going to be sponsoring a child and you're going to take the easy way out by just sponsoring a child, for an organization to cut off the education of a child for the simple reason that student turns 18 is ridiculous. That is ridiculous.
Yes, I agree. But Michael, as you know, you visited Quach Academy in Gulu. And Quach Academy it was set up in a very different way from other NGOs. We were not even NGOs. We were community-based, that we worked with the children. We worked with the parents. So we knew the parent. And what we did, we had the microloan where we were giving the microloan to parents, and there was almost interest-free, where the parents were just basically keeping our money, but they needed to invest that in businesses. And we gave business training to the parent because we identified that the child is not poor. It's the parent that needs to be helped.
Yeah, and that's providing a sustainable foundation, because, you want to be able to do a knowledge transfer or to give a skill set to caretakers. And again, whether they're parents or caretakers or other relatives, aunties or uncles, what people need to realize too is, the word orphan is used very liberally. The way that we understand an orphan to be, or an orphan to be defined in the United States or in the UK, is not how orphan is understood in other parts of the world. We assume that an orphan is somebody that, has lost both parents and was found wandering the streets or living all by themselves, out in the bush somewhere. That's not what an orphan is in the eyes of many other cultures. And I'll give an example. An orphan could be a child that was sent away to boarding school. Maybe their parents in the village said, you know what, there's no opportunity for education here, so we're going to send the student to the city or to a larger town to attend school where they'll get, a sponsor. And all we have to do is say that the child's an orphan because, the child really isn't living with its parents. The child doesn't have parents because they live the majority of the year alone, well, not alone, but at a boarding school away from the parents. So, that child is an orphan. I've seen that
Mike,
so many times.
Mike, I just want to point out there's NGOs that try to use this poverty porn in the UK. They say child poverty. A lot of academia came out and say stop it. There's no such thing as child poverty in the UK. The child may be poor because the child don't have books. The child have TV rather than books. So you see, poverty means different things to different people.
Oh,
There's a lot of the NGOs that are going to Africa and say there's child poverty because they see that the child don't have shoes, the child don't have TV, the child don't have what they have in Europe and America. What maybe the child needs is food and help the parents so the parent can help the child to go to school because then to have a strong role model is very important to a child. Mike, we're coming to the end of our show, but
I looked at the clock and I'm like, where does the time go? I mean, you and I can go on.
Michael,
Guys, you're so interesting that you lose track of the time. I understand. Great topic.
Michael have something very special for next week. We like to talk about Congo. So, Michael, can you talk about that a little? You're going to invite a guest.
I don't want to name any names because we haven't confirmed or anything. But with issues going on in Congo that are in the news, I do want to invite one of the top experts and a leading advocate on really revealing, and he's a Congolese man, and he knows the issue. And he speaks the truth. And come back next week and try and focus on issues in the Great Lakes region, Congo, Southern Sudan, Rwanda, Uganda, and focus on those issues and really try to understand and dig into the root and the causes, not just the symptoms, but we want to discuss the causes of these things.
Because, Michael, most people, when they think of the war in Africa, they say this tribal war. When I say these are not tribal war, these are people fighting for their land. They're fighting for the basic rights.
Okay, thank you so much, Monique.
Thank you so much, Barry, and thank you, Michael. Join us next week.
Definitely, thank you much. Good girls, guys. Great.
Thank you very much.
That was Monique Wyatt and Monique from London and Mike from Dallas, Texas, talking about the African issues. I do hope my African friends, brothers and sisters appreciate their input, information from our motherland. Once again, ABN, making it happen.